Let not your heart be troubled. You are listening to the Sean Hannity Radio Show podcast. If you're like me and suffer from insomnia, you know what? That's not fun. I tried everything. I couldn't get a good night's sleep. And this is neither drug nor alcohol induced. That's right. It is MyPillow. Mike Lindell invented it, and he fitted me for my first MyPillow, and it's changed my life. I fall asleep faster, stay asleep longer, and the good news, you can too. Just go to MyPillow.com, promo code Sean, and take advantage of one of Mike Lindell's best offers, his special 4-pack. You get 50% off 2 MyPillow premium pillows, 2 Go Anywhere pillows. Now, MyPillow is made in the USA, has a 60-day unconditional money-back guarantee, no risk to you, and a 10-year warranty. You don't want to spend more sleepless nights on a pillow tossing and turning that's not working for you. Just go to MyPillow.com right now, use the promo code Sean, and you get Mike Lindell's special 4-pack. You get 2 MyPillow premium pillows, 2 Go Anywhere pillows, 50% off, and you'll start getting the kind of peaceful and restful and comfortable and deep healing and recuperative sleep you've been craving and deserve. MyPillow.com, promo code Sean. The FBI never would have sought the FISA warrant without the phony Clinton bought and paid for Russian propaganda dossier full of lies and salacious details. And the author of the Trump dossier, Christopher Steele, desperate that Donald Trump, desperate that he not get elected. And that is one of so many revelations that we have for you today. Glad you're with us. Write down our toll-free telephone number just to let you know there's so much to cover today. I'm going to try and go as slowly and methodically as I can. There's a lot of deep detail to all of this. Jay Sekulow, the counsel for the president, joins us today. We have Mark Meadows and Jim Jordan. They have been fighting hard on all this. Sarah Carter first reported a FISA warrant with John Solomon on March the 8th on my show. I have tape of me March 6th basically laying out all of this had happened already. And the media has ignored it all, and they're still trying to ignore it. Still, well, the Democrats will come up with something to counter this sometime. That's the only defense they have today, as they are complicit in a lot of this, because everything they've said for the last year and reported on for the last year is no facts, no information, no truth to it whatsoever. And all of this information has been available. We've been digging deep every single day, and we've got the tapes to prove it. We'll play some of them today, but it's sad. Part of me I don't know, part of me thought when this came out and the vindication that I have of all that we've been reporting, all turning out to be true. What I am going to say to you today from this memo that was released is going to be familiar to you. That is the most important part. We've been working hard to unpeel every single layer of the onion. Now, there's new information that I had never known about, and it even makes it worse. And as bad as I knew this was, this makes it twice as bad after reading and rereading this memo, as I have been doing since its release a little after noon today. But everything we have been telling you is right. Everything the media has been telling you for a year is wrong. A part of me thought I'd be happy about that, but I'm not, because I'm sad. I am sad because we have in front of us here today the biggest abuse of power and corruption case that I can think of in American history. And I'm going to explain in every detail to all of this. Now, let me just start with, what have I been talking about now for so long about as it relates to the dossier? I'm not even talking about Uranium One. I'm not talking about surveillance, unmasking, releasing raw intelligence and other abuses. And I can tell you that this 4-page memo is only the tip of the iceberg in terms of there's more to come out on top of this in terms of abuse and power and corruption and a desire to influence a presidential election in this country. It is in every American. This is what is so sad about the state of affairs today. Any American should be very, very, very upset and angry. It's very chilling to see that in the United States of America, a few people in positions of power think that they know so much better than we do that they are willing to work behind the scenes and influence the electoral process because they think they know what's right. And it all got started with the Clinton cartel corruption and Hillary's email server scandal And if you want me, if you want to really understand that, you have to understand this. Everything it seems involving the Clintons is rigged. I have no idea why Bernie Sanders and his supporters never got as angry as they should have, because the fix was in, as per Donna Brazil in her book. It was rigged. The primary was rigged. We had empirical evidence. We had some evidence that it was happening with the superdelegates, but the whole thing was done. She controlled the DNC. And then that became, remember, on the eve of the convention. I don't want to get too deep into the weeds on all of this. So this is just how the Clintons operate. Then you've got Hillary Clinton violating numerous felonies. The Espionage Act, 18 U.S.C. 793. You are not allowed to mishandle classified, top secret, special access programming information. Well, Hillary Clinton did not want congressional oversight, and she set up her own email server, which she knew she was not supposed to do, in a mom and pop shop bathroom closet. Okay, that's mishandling a classified, top secret, special access program information. That is a crime in and of itself. Then, when she was subpoenaed in the case of the emails, well, she deleted 33,000 emails. I defy any of you in this audience to go delete 33,000 subpoenaed emails. Good luck practicing that, because you would likely go to jail. Then, to make super sure that nobody ever got it, she used bleach bits. She acid washed the hard drives. Then, to make triply sure, she took the devices, the BlackBerries, and had an aide bust them up with a hammer. And the few devices she ultimately did hand over to the FBI, well, they didn't have SIM cards. They were rendered useless by Hillary. So you have not only a violation of mishandling and destroying classified information and such, but then you have the added bonus of obstruction of justice. All right, that's important. Now, Hillary rigs the primary with Bernie. Why not rig the general election too? So Hillary Clinton works for Fusion GPS. Fusion GPS works with, Christopher Steele, a spy from MI6, spy, known Russia ties. He puts together a dossier. This is a guy that said he had a vested interest. He never wanted Donald Trump to be president. So Christopher Steele puts together unverified. Fusion GPS admitted before the Senate committee they never verified any of the information that Christopher Steele provided in the dossier. And then before the House Intel Committee, remember, we learned that, in fact, Fusion GPS was working, in fact, with the Clinton campaign to get the phony information out there. Russian hookers peeing in a bed in Moscow at a Ritz. Here's what happens in the process. Then that dossier, if it's not bad enough that she and her campaign and the DNC paid for Russian propaganda to lie to the American people, if that's not bad enough, op research is one thing, but this takes it 10 notches higher, that you're paying for lies from Russian propaganda, so they can influence our election. This is ironic. Then the dossier that's compiled by Steele on behalf of Hillary and the Democratic Party, that then becomes the essential part of the FISA application. Just to give you a little timeline on all of this, there was a first attempt to get a FISA warrant on the Trump campaign in the summer of 2016. It rarely happens that FISA warrants are denied. It was denied. And remember, Andrew McCabe is saying, without the dossier, we wouldn't have even tried to get the FISA warrant. So you got Christopher Steele being paid by the DNC and Hillary Clinton, funneled through this law firm, the same law firm, Perkins Coie, and in working for Fusion GPS, who's working for the Hillary campaign. They were paid to obtain derogatory information on Donald Trump. Turns out to be false, most of it. None of it's corroborated. None of it's verified. As a matter of fact, just when James Comey met with Donald Trump during the transition, remember he said it was salacious and unverified? Well, that's 2 months earlier. The same Comey's going before a court and signing an order saying, we need a FISA warrant because of this. James Comey leads lawyers immediately. He's tweeting out today. And I wrote, Jim, you have the right to remain silent. He's in deep legal trouble. He has no idea. And his lawyer's probably having a fit. Anyway, so Steele was a longtime FBI source at the time. This money's being funneled from Hillary and the DNC into the coffers of Fusion GPS and Christopher Steele. Now, When they go to the court the second time in October of 2016, they were denied the first time. And when they go 3 other times for renewals, they never told the FISA court. They purposefully misled and lied to the FISA court, as a matter of fact. The role of the DNC, the role of the Clinton campaign, the role of the political process in funding this Steele dossier, even though political origins of the Steele dossier were well known to senior DOJ and FBI officials. In other words, they lied to a judge to get a warrant and purposely withheld information. That sounds a little bit like Andrew Weissman. Now, you got to understand, the initial FISA application, the one in October, not the one that they denied, noted that Steele was working for a named U.S. person. They never mentioned Glenn Simpson. They never mentioned Fusion GPS, who was paid for by the law firm Perkins Coie. Basically, it's like money laundering through there, and they knew it, but they never told the judge. In other words, you have Perkins Coie representing Hillary's campaign and the DNC. They funnel the money through that law firm, even though it was known by the DOJ at the time that the political actors were involved in the Steele dossier. The application doesn't mention that Steele was ultimately working on behalf of and paid for by the Clinton campaign and the DNC, or that the FBI had separately authorized payments to Steele for the same information. And then it gets even worse. Then Christopher Steele leaks information which pisses off the FBI to Michael Isikoff. Michael Isikoff posts a Yahoo News article using information fed to him by Christopher Steele. So the FBI, it's the same information, the same source. They filed it separately to purposely deceive the court as if it was somehow some corroborating evidence to the dossier when it came from the same source. And the article never corroborated this whole thing. Now, it gets worse. When James Comey's telling incoming President-elect Donald Trump, this dossier is salacious and unverified, then why would the FBI 2 months, 3 months earlier be going to a FISA court and presenting it as a credible reason to get a FISA warrant against Trump? Do you see how this is all working here? And I'm still only touching the surface here. Now, there we have this whole issue involving Bruce Orr that we've got to get into. And more importantly, what does it mean? And what should happen? And what's going to happen? And how did it impact? If this never happened, there would be no Robert Mueller. There would be no special counsel. The country would not have been in a state of conflict for the last year. And the people that elected Donald Trump and the people who didn't. This goes to such a disservice. And it's all because they wanted one candidate to win. And when that candidate didn't win, they wanted to undermine the candidate that they didn't want to win. And we now have the evidence. It is the biggest case of corruption in U.S. history, abuse of power in U.S. history. If we don't get to the bottom of this, I'm telling you, we don't have a constitution left. And everything we've been telling you for the last year is true. And everything the media has been telling you has been nothing but a lie. All right, as we roll along, Sean Hannity Show. All right, the memo out, the memo released, what it means. We have full coverage. It's going to take the entire show today to get through all of this. And, of course, Hannity tonight, 9 Eastern on the Fox News Channel. One of the other things that we've got to dig deep into as it relates to this memo is it goes into the whole issue of, Steele suspended and then terminated as an FBI source for what the FBI defines as the most serious of violations, and that was unauthorized disclosure to the media. His relationship apparently did that with David Corn, Mother Jones, and Steele could have been terminated for his previous undisclosed contacts. Remember, we had reports that James Comey wanted to pay this guy. And again, it's unverified information. And he's saying one thing to Donald Trump, oh, it's salacious and unverified. I just needed to tell you, I don't want this to be Herbert Hoover. And on the other hand, 2 months earlier, with a knife in Trump's back, he's the one signing this thing away as if it's, written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John and truthful when they know better. And they never revealed to the court the political connections. But Steele's numerous contacts with the media violated the FBI's cardinal rule. Now, before and after Steele was terminated as a source, he maintained contact with the DOJ via the Associate Deputy Attorney General Bruce Orr. And as a senior DOJ official, worked closely with Deputy Attorneys Yates and later Rosenstein. Those are people that extended this FISA farce 3 separate times. And shortly after the election, the FBI began interviewing Orr, documenting his communications that were ongoing with Steele. For example, in September 2016, Steele admitted to Orr his feelings against then-candidate Trump when he said that he was desperate that Donald Trump not get elected and passionate about not being president. Okay, the FBI knew how he felt, and a month later they still used that salacious, phony dossier and not revealing to the FISA court his feelings or that he represented Clinton and the DNC. And then remember, it's clear evidence of his bias. His own wife was employed by Fusion GPS, and she was doing the op research on Trump. And Orr later provided the FBI with all of his wife's op research paid for by Clinton and the DNC via Fusion GPS. And the Orr's relationship with Steele and Fusion GPS was inexplicably concealed to the FISA court. They lied repeatedly, especially through omission, purposeful omission to the FISA court. All right, thanks, Scott Shannon. Yeah, abuse of liberties, abuse of power. The most corrupt case I've ever seen in my life. We've never seen anything like this. They've tried to put the fix in everywhere and for everything. Now, let me continue back to the memo for just a minute here, just talking about Bruce Orr. I mean, Bruce Orr, this is interesting because after dossier is exposed, they knew when they went to the FISA court. They knew it. Now, think about this. They knew the dossier compiled by Christopher Steele on behalf of Fusion GPS, on behalf of the DNC, on behalf of the Hillary campaign. That became the essential argument for the previously denied attempt to get a FISA warrant. That was it. And Andrew McCabe even said as much. We wouldn't have sought an attempt to get a warrant without the dossier. Now, the dossier, Steele is a longtime FBI source, et cetera, but they're funneling the money to Steele vis-a-vis, the same law firm. The DNC and Hillary use this Perkins Coie law firm. And they pay Fusion GPS, which I assume then pays Christopher Steele. And then they get all of these salacious Russian made-up lies on then candidate Donald Trump. And when they go before the FISA court before the election after it was originally denied. Now, remember, months later, James Comey is going to say that it was salacious and unverified. But when it was October of 2016 and they're making a second attempt, without which, as McCabe is saying, without which they wouldn't have even made the attempt without the dossier, neither in that application or the renewal applications, all 3 of them, 4 altogether, do they ever disclose to the FISA judge? Not one time do they reference where this dossier originated from. It came from the Clinton campaign that bought and paid for by the DNC that she's controlling the money of, according to Donna Brazil. They never mentioned the Clinton campaign, DNC. They never mentioned any party, any campaign funding these efforts of Christopher Steele through Fusion GPS, even though the DOJ and FBI officials, senior officials, all knew that these had political origins. And the initial FISA application noted, oh, yes, Steele works for a named U.S. person, but they don't name Fusion GPS. They don't mention Glenn Simpson. They don't mention the Clinton campaign. They don't mention the DNC. They don't do that at all. But they mention a law firm that they funnel the money through. And it was known by the DOJ and the people involved here that political actors were the ones that were funding this. So the money is used and it's hidden from the FISA judge so he can make a fair, balanced, and a decision and know that there's no political shenanigans going on. This is all done by design. So they can spy on an opposition candidate in the lead up to an election and then a president-elect after the election. The application, doesn't mention the real actors here. Didn't mention that Steele was working on behalf of Clinton and the DNC. I mean, it's beyond corrupt. They basically are lying through omission to this judge. It's going to be interesting to see when the judge now reads this, what the judge in this case that granted the FISA warrant is going to think about all of this. And then they get even more deceptive because Steele, and it's known by the FBI, Steele leaks information to Michael Isikoff. And in early September, he writes an article in Yahoo News. And that focuses on Carter Page's trip to Moscow. The article does not corroborate the Steele dossier because it is derived from information that was leaked by Steele himself to Yahoo News. Now, but what they do, they think they're being clever, is they're presenting to the court something that looks like a separate independent source when it's all the same source, Christopher Steele. And, then Steele's suspended, and then we have the contacts continuing with the Department of Justice. In this case, through the Associate Deputy Attorney Bruce Orr, senior DOJ official, worked closely with, Deputy Attorneys Yates and Rosenstein. And then shortly after the election, the FBI begins interviewing Orr, documenting his communications still with Steele. Again, after the election. In September of 2016, Steele admitted to Orr how he felt about Trump. He was desperate that Donald Trump not get elected and was passionate about him not being the president. Oh, by the way, he's not an American citizen. I thought we didn't like outside countries or outside individuals influencing our election. Apparently it was okay in this case. And it's clear evidence of his bias against Trump because it was recorded by Bruce Orr at the time. And Bruce Orr's wife, where did she work? At Fusion GPS. And she's assisting in the cultivation of this op research, this phony Trump dossier. And Orr later provides the phony information, his wife's op research, paid for by Clinton and the DNC. Well, he provides it vis-a-vis his wife to the FBI. And then Orr's relationship with Steele and Fusion GPS was concealed from the FISA court. Now, according to the head of the FBI's counterintelligence division, the assistant director, Bill Priestap, corroboration of the Steele dossier, quote, was in its infancy at the time of the initial FISA application. So in other words, it was unverified. Now, think about that. Why would you bring an unverified, or if it's only in the infancy stages of being verified at the time of that you're applying for a FISA warrant? If you haven't verified it, it ought not have been presented. And then you ought not hide who's really behind it all. Anyway, in early 2017, remember, Director Comey, he briefed President-elect Donald Trump. Months earlier, he's signing off on, let's go forward with this unverified salacious document. Well, the problem is he wasn't saying that to the FISA court 2 months earlier. He was presenting it as credible evidence to get the FISA warrant. He's getting so arrogant in his tweets. I actually tweeted out to James Comey today, you have the right to remain silent. I suggest you exercise that right. James Comey's in a huge legal mess. And if I'm Comey's attorney, I'm telling him, you send out one more tweet, get a new lawyer. I'm out. Because you can't, he's literally, every time he opens his mouth, he's making the job of his attorney 1,000 times harder. Actually gave Comey good advice if he'd take it. So while the FISA application relied on Steele and his past record of what they say is credible reporting on other unrelated matters, well, they ignore or conceal that his anti-Trump dossier was driven by A, ideological reasons, and B, financial reasons. And then they hide where the money comes, and they don't go back to the sourcing of the financing of that dossier. And they knew all of it at the time that they got this. And then you've got the Deputy Director McCabe testifying before the committee in December. No surveillance warrant would have been sought from FISA without the Steele dossier information. Wow. It's an unbelievable case of abuse of power. You've got the top people in intelligence using the powerful weaponry of intelligence and false propaganda, ironically from Russia, bought and paid for by one candidate, Hillary Clinton, the very same person many of these same actors protected from being indicted, then being used as a means to spy on the Trump candidacy and then later the Trump transition team up until, this went on almost through last June. So the Page FISA application mentions the information regarding, fellow Trump campaign advisor George Papadopoulos, but there's no evidence of any cooperation or conspiracy between Page and Papadopoulos. The Papadopoulos information triggered the opening of the FBI counterintelligence investigation in July of 2016 by FBI agent Peter Strzok, and Strzok was reassigned by the special counsel's office to the FBI Human Resources were these improper text messages with his mistress, Lisa Page, and where they were both demonstrating a clear bias against Trump in favor of Clinton, whom Strzok had also investigated. I wonder how General Flynn feels today in light of all of this. Because without this warrant, General Flynn wouldn't have been illegally unmasked and surveilled, and raw intelligence wouldn't have been leaked that created a perjury trap for him. Either he misremembered or he lied, but they wouldn't have known either way because they wouldn't have had the information but for this FISA warrant. Wonder how Paul Manafort's feeling today. Now, if we're going to allow one candidate to buy Russian lies to influence an election, that's bad enough. In other words, Hillary Clinton's campaign had no problem pushing out phony, salacious lies to the media, their compliant friends in the media, to win the campaign and create an image of Donald Trump that's false. That's bad enough. But that's kind of the playbook of Democrats in every election season. They want to say Republicans are racist and sexist and homophobic and xenophobic and Islamophobic and this phobic and that phobic. That's what they do. That's in their playbook. But now they know it's being used as the basis to get a FISA warrant, which is hard to get, to spy on an opposition candidate in an election year. And all the people involved obviously hate one candidate and like the other. James Comey saved Hillary Clinton. James Comey exonerated Hillary Clinton before he investigated Hillary Clinton. James Comey is up to his eyeballs along with Peter Strzok. Why does Peter Strzok still have a job at the FBI? Now, I do appreciate the fact that we've now learned that a senior U.S. official, it means that the Attorney General is sending the matter to the Department of the Inspector General, and the IG is going to be receiving the referral to look into the circumstances that brought forward this Nunes memo. By the way, thank God for Nunes putting this out. Now, if you watch cable news, you know, all the people in the media that lied to you for the last year with no evidence of Trump-Russia collusion, and they knew because they watch every night. If I say one word, they're tweeting at me, everybody in the media. They're obsessed with watching my show. They can't believe we're number one in cable. Maybe it's because we do independent work and we don't rely on, you know, this whatever you want to call it. You got a incestuous group of people that live in this phony echo chamber that just doesn't abide by truth. They're all pathological in their hatred for Donald Trump at this point. You know, so within minutes of the release of the memo, the Senate Democrats, other Democrats taking to Twitter their disapproval of the release of the document. Why wouldn't they want the American people to know that corruption at this high level happened in the United States? You know, we are a country governed by the rule of law, and if we had equal justice under the law, Hillary never would have been the candidate in 2016. She would have been charged. Comey, Strzok, Page, McCabe, and probably Loretta Lynn saved that from happening because they wanted her to continue, if you look at the timeline. And then the very same people that hate Donald Trump, they knew where this dossier came from. They purposely hid the finances from the FISA court because they so wanted to disrupt the election process and influence an election in the United States of America. This is not a banana republic we're talking about here. And besides proving the entire investigation was bogus, based on a bogus dossier. Look at Rod Rosenstein and all this. There are now many calls for him to resign. Well, he definitely should. Ron DeSantis said, I think Rosenstein is going to have to come to Congress and explain his role in extending this FISA warrant. Why did he extend it? What did he know? When did he know it? And it goes back even further than that. I mean, did he go back and review it? And was he satisfied or just signed away and didn't do his due diligence? Either way, he should be fired. You know, Rosenstein goes back to the court for extensions 3 separate times. And in order to do that, he would have to have new proof that there was evidence off of the initial surveillance that led him to believe that the surveillance was necessary to continue. The initial justification for FISA, that would need to have been proven. And there was no further evidence of a crime to justify any continued surveillance. There never was. And that all leads us to a special counsel that never should have been appointed. You know, Comey, on the one hand, is tweeting out, that's all they got. And on the other hand, he's tweeting out dishonest, misleading memo, wrecked the House Intelligence Committee, destroyed trust with the intelligence community. No, Mr. Comey, you did that because you didn't give all the facts to the FISA court judge because you didn't like Donald Trump. And you got top Democrats telling Trump, you know, please, you can't use this to fire Rosenstein. Oh, really? OK, we'll take your advice in all of this. But the FISA court never would have approved spying on Trump without the FBI's bogus Trump dossier that they didn't tell the judge about. And then it proves, by the way, that Adam Schiff blatantly lied about damaging national security. That was a lie that was perpetrated all day yesterday by everybody in the media. You know, and then you've got, there's one report out today that the NYPD actually had to force the FBI to investigate Hillary's emails on Weiner's laptop, and they hid that for 3 separate weeks. Why did they do that, Mr. Comey? And McCabe told FBI investigators to stand down on the Clinton Foundation investigation. This is only today's not the big day. There's many big days coming, and it will shock the conscience and soul of America. If we don't get this fixed, we don't get this right, we don't have any rule of law. We don't have equal justice under the law, and we have no constitution. We're shredding. All we have is a big brother government that's free to spy on us as long as somebody's willing to lie about you and not tell the judge the truth. Now, weak Republicans, and there are many of them out. Oh, this doesn't impact the Mueller investigation. Yeah, it does on 1,000 different levels, because it wouldn't exist but for the corruption and abuse of power that predicated the entire narrative. So you're dead wrong, as usual, and afraid of your own show. Well, I don't want to say anything bad about the special counsel. Just look at the team of partisan hacks that Mueller has put together, and look at the corrupt level that of people that he puts in there, like Andrew Weissman. We'll explain Jay Sekulow, Jim Jordan, Mark Meadows next. All right, here's a cut of me from March 6, 2017, just to explain how long we have been on this. I've spent a lot of time on this program in the last number of weeks talking about the shadow government, the deep state, a bunch of Obama holdovers, a bunch of career bureaucrats. We have all of these intelligence leaks, and nobody can seem to get to the bottom of it. This is the swamp. Obama holdovers, lifelong bureaucrats that are sabotaging. This is the shadow government I've been talking about. This is what deep state means. They are sabotaging the Trump presidency. When it appears that, in fact, there has been surveillance. All evidence indicates that, in fact, Obama administration and officials surrounding the president. What did the president know? When did he know it? What did Valerie Jarrett know? What did Ben Rhodes know? What did David Axelrod know? What did Dan Pfeiffer know? And when did they know it? And we still have those questions. That was from this radio program, March 6th, 2017, discussing all this. It has taken this long, and here we are. Glad you're with us. Howard 2, 800-941-SEAN, our toll-free telephone number. What did we discover? That the dossier filled with Russian lies, propaganda, misinformation, bought and paid for by Hillary Clinton, compiled by Christopher Steele, paid for by Clinton and the DNC, and the DNC that she was literally running or controlling the finances of, funneled through a law firm, Perkins Coie, same law firm the DNC and Hillary's campaign used, and literally neither initial application to the FISA court nor any renewals of the 3 renewals that they had disclose or reference this important fact, that the DNC, that the Clinton campaign, that a political party was funding Steele's efforts for misinformation, bought and paid for Russian lies, even though the political origins of the Steele dossier were in fact known to senior DOJ and FBI officials. They didn't tell the FISA court. They lied to the court by omission in that case. And the initial FISA application notes that Steele was working for a named U.S. person, but they don't name Fusion GPS. They don't name Glenn Simpson, who was paid by a U.S. law firm, Perkins Coie, representing the DNC and the Hillary campaign. That was known by the DOJ at the time. In other words, that political actors were involved in the Steele dossier. And the application never mentioned that Steele was ultimately working on behalf of and paid for by the DNC and the Clinton campaign, or that the FBI had separately authorized payments themselves to Steele for same information. And it gets worse than that. Then they used basically Christopher Steele leaking to Michael Isikoff the same information, and they present it to the court as if they're 2 separate findings when they knew it was the same source. This is the biggest corruption, abuse of power scandal that I can think of in the history of the country. Joining us, 2 people that fought on your behalf to actually read this despicable document, this scary document on many levels. Congressman Mark Meadows, North Carolina, Congressman Jim Jordan, both of you, to your credit, have really been way ahead of the curve on this, and you have seen this coming. Where are we now that it's been released, and what should happen? Mark Meadows.
Well, obviously, you've been reporting on this for a long time, too, Sean, and so today is the start of hopefully getting the FBI and the Department of Justice back to protecting our constitutional rights. It's not right for someone to go to a secret court and with a unverified and what Director James Comey would say, salacious unverified dossier, use that to spy on Americans. We just can't have that. And so it's time that we hold the FBI and DOJ accountable. Time for a special prosecutor, in my mind.
What do you think, Jim Jordan? And you have been very passionate and outspoken in these hearings, digging for the truth. And, you know, now we know why Rod Rosenstein in the last minute didn't beg Paul Ryan not to release this information. Part of you may feel vindicated, and a part of you may feel sick to your stomach that this happened in this country.
No kidding. Secret court to get a secret warrant to spy on a fellow American citizen, and they don't tell the court that it's a document that's unproven and paid for by the Clinton campaign. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, 4 times. They go to that court and they don't tell them that fundamental fact. They don't tell them about Bruce Orr and his wife Nellie, or they don't tell them about this should never happen. And I've been so ticked about this. When Mark and I first read it 2 weeks ago, we said this should never happen in this great country, and it did. They took this salacious, unverified, unproven, ridiculous document, dressed it all up, and then did that, as you pointed out, the Isikoff story, to buttress it with some crazy story that's the same source, Christopher Steele. Here's another thing, Sean. The FBI terminated their relationship with Steele because he was leaking to the press, and yet 3 times after that termination took place, they went to the FISA court and continued the warrant. Unbelievable what these people did. And the fact that some people in the press are saying this is huge what they did. And for the FBI of this great country to do that is just completely
You know what's amazing? But we've reached a point where Trump derangement syndrome, or the hatred of President Trump, you know, we saw it on display on Tuesday night. It would prevent people from applauding the fact that we have such a massive economic turnaround and that we have the lowest Black American unemployment, Hispanic American unemployment level in the history of the country, things that everybody should be united and happy about, but that would not cause or allow Democrats to say good job. In this particular case, you know, for whatever reason, I guess civil liberties no longer mean anything to the Democratic Party. But I have this question for them, Mark Meadows. Let's imagine that this was a Donald Trump bought and paid for dossier full of lies and salacious details about hookers in the Ritz-Carlton involving Hillary Clinton. And let's say that bought and paid for Trump dossier was then used to obtain a FISA warrant on Hillary Clinton in the lead up to a campaign, and then a president-elect Hillary Clinton. I'm guessing with a certain amount of, I guess with almost 100% certainty that the left would be going insane right now.
Well, they would, and I think what you would see is Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi changing the tune, you know, because all of a sudden they would say, well, how could you allow this to happen? Now, here's the other interesting thing. We're sitting here looking at this in retrospect, but you've got to take it into the context. All of this happened right after Hillary Clinton was exonerated. And then all of a sudden what we use is this particular dossier to go and spy on Americans, like Jim was talking about. But even more importantly than that is when we found out that there was a problem, when we found out that Christopher Steele was leaking to the media, when he was fired by the FBI, we never told the judge that had to renew the warrant over and over again that had happened. I mean,
that's Rod Rosenstein at some point, the same guy that appointed Mueller. How does this impact the Mueller special counsel? Would the Mueller special counsel exist had this FISA warrant never been granted?
Yeah, we don't know. We don't know, Sean. But
I tend to doubt it.
Yeah, I mean, what they did is so egregious, so fundamentally wrong. You just can't operate that way in a country that, in the United States of America, this took place. And that, again, this is a secret court where they go get a warrant to spy on Americans. And they did that by dressing it all up and making it look like it was legit intelligence, and it wasn't. That is the fundamental issue here. And the thing, when you step back and look at this, is what they took to the court, salacious, unverified dossier. McCabe said this was the only way they were going to get the warrant is to use the dossier, and then they failed to tell the court two things. They omitted two things, Bruce and Nellie Orr, and they omitted the fact that the DNC and the Clinton campaign paid for it. And then they buttressed it by throwing in the Isikoff story.
We just got some breaking news, by the way. It appears that a senior U.S. official confirming to Fox News that the Attorney General will be sending this matter to the Department of Justice Inspector General. In other words, the IG will be receiving a referral to look into the circumstances brought forward by this Nunes memo. Accordingly, I will forward to appropriate DOJ components all information I receive from Congress regarding this. We are expecting, I guess, an IG report. Tell me, Mark Meadows, if any part of what I'm about to say is untrue, that Comey, Strzok, Page, Andrew McCabe, and likely Loretta Lynch never had any intention of looking into Hillary Clinton's. We know she committed felonies. We know she violated the Espionage Act as it relates to an email server scandal. We know she destroyed evidence. And so they all decided long before the investigation to exonerate her. Then Hillary Clinton, do you disagree with that?
No, we do know that. We do know that before they interviewed the last 17 witnesses, the decision to make sure she was innocent had already been made. And
this was months before they began drafting that exoneration.
Back in May, when there was a text message between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, which says we've got to get this thing over with very quickly because we now know that it's Hillary Clinton against Donald Trump. We've got to get it over very quickly. Within hours of that text message, we know that the exoneration letter was changed to make sure that she was not going to be found guilty. That is very suspect.
And we now know that Hillary was the principal through her campaign and the DNC, whose finances she controlled, paid for the phony Russian propaganda dossier. That was to manipulate the American people in an election with Russian propaganda, and that became the basis of a FISA warrant, even though it was unverified, and they never told the court it was unverified, nor did they ever tell the FISA court that, in fact, it was a political component to all of this. That's all true, isn't it?
Well, that's all true, and I think the other thing that we're missing here is that there has been all kinds of allegations of Russian collusion. Well, it's apparent that the only Russia collusion or only collusion that took place was actually between elements of the DOJ and FBI and the Hillary Clinton campaign. If there was payments going to anybody in Russia, it now appears that it went through Christopher Steele.
Correct.
To put together this dossier.
And he has a history of doing as much, does he not?
You know, he's got a history. I mean, he was seen as an informed, confidential informant for the FBI, and that was part of their pushback. You know, he had a good reputation before. But listen, there were so many signs that were going up.
Well, he hated Donald Trump. He was invested in Donald Trump not winning. All right, quick break. Right back.
Exactly.
Mark Meadows, Congressman Meadows from North Carolina, Jim Jordan from Ohio. 800-941-SEAN is our toll-free telephone number. Jay Sekulow is coming up and much more straight ahead. All right, as we continue with Congressman Mark Meadows with the Freedom Caucus, he is the chairman of the Freedom Caucus. Jim Jordan, former chairman, he's been ousted in a coup by Meadows. As we discuss the memo that was released at around noon today, the one we've heard so much about. I just look at this, Jim Jordan, as one of the biggest abuses of power at the upper levels of the Department of Justice, the FBI, and our intel community, having weaponized these powerful tools of intelligence to help a candidate win an election and then to spy on an incoming president.
Yep. No, you're exactly right, Sean. This was done, salacious, unverified document taken to the court. They said this is the only way they were going to get the warrant was to use this dossier. When they went to the court, they failed to tell the court that it was paid for by the Democrat National Committee, and they did this 4 times, went to the court 4 times, didn't tell them who financed it, who put this opposition research unverified document together, and they did it in the context of a presidential campaign.
But this is, we have 18 U.S. Code 242, which talks about abuse of power. Wouldn't that seemingly fit in a case like this?
That's why Jeff Sessions is calling for the Inspector General to look at it. And you know what I think is going to happen at some point? What Mark and I called for back in July, a second special counsel to look at all this. There is no way that we can get to the bottom of this. Mueller can't take this over. I think he's inherently compromised. Sessions can't take this over because of his recusal issue. So you're going to have a second special counsel to look at this. And understand this too, Sean. Think about what's happened at the top level of the FBI. Comey is gone. McCabe is going to leave. Rubicki, chief of staff, has said he's stepping down. Page has been reassigned. Strzok has been reassigned. And over on the Justice Department side, you've got Bruce Orr, who's also been reassigned. And oh, by the way, the chief counsel at the FBI, Jim Baker, he's also been reassigned. So this is the top people at the FBI. This is why you have to have a special counsel to look into all those individuals who were involved with what we learned in this memo that took place at our Justice Department.
What do you think of James Comey after all of this, Mark Meadows?
Well, obviously, he's already tweeting out, "Is that it?" And as he, trying to indicate that this is not a big deal. Well, if he doesn't see this as a big deal, that is part of the problem. And I have just a real concern because we've got tens of thousands of outstanding FBI and DOJ officials that do a hard job and a great job each and every day. And what we have are a few people at the very top creating a situation that actually paints them in a bad light. It is time that we not only do the Inspector General as what Jeff Sessions has just called for. Well, the Inspector General can't bring charges. So that's why Jim and I have been consistent for
special counsel. All right.
Counsel, because they could actually prosecute.
All right, we'll have a lot more on this tonight. I want to thank both of you for fighting for the right of the American people to see such corruption at such a high level of government. And you didn't think it could happen here. It happened. Jim Jordan, Congressman Meadows, thank you. 800-941-SEAN, toll-free telephone number. Sarah Carter, Dan Bongino coming up. Jay Sekulow will weigh in on all of this.
If someone is to use the unmasking process for a political purpose, is that potentially a crime?
Yes, Senator.
I mean, this is what a lot of Americans are believing right now, and I certainly do, that the Comey FBI and the Obama Justice Department worked with one campaign to go after the other campaign. That's what everything points to.
That FISA, though, was a general FISA that covered the whole Russian hacking investigation. What we don't know is who was connected to that FISA. What was that FISA looking at? And that is very highly classified. Nobody wants to talk about that particular FISA right now. There is a distinction between a FISA and then a wiretapping, but they did tap. I mean, they were looking.
In the eyes of people watching, it is the U.S. government officials leaking the name of a U.S. citizen, and if it can happen here, it may happen there.
I think the FBI has engaged in activities that they shouldn't be engaged in. You're right. You're exactly right. It's a $12 million Democrat product, of which the FBI co-opted. And listen, we don't have to look any further than Bruce Orr. But why would Bruce Orr be meeting with the person who wrote the dossier?
August 2016. And my guess is that's the same month that the application was taken to the FISA court to get the warrants to spy on Americans. Using this dossier that the Clinton campaign paid for, Democrats paid for, fake news, all dressed up, taken to the court.
We also have seen now people in the Department of Justice who were married to people that were doing opposition research on Trump. So you can see how people are human and bias could enter into this. And the history of the CIA and the FBI are not without blemish.
The Democrat National Committee and the Clinton campaign, which we now know were one and the same, paid the law firm who paid Fusion GPS, who paid Christopher Steele, who then paid Russians to put together a report that we call a dossier full of all kinds of fake news, National Enquirer garbage. And it's been reported that this dossier was all dressed up by the FBI, taken to the FISA court, and presented as a legitimate intelligence document, that it became the basis for granting a warrant to spy on Americans.
That is just a trip down memory lane. We first broke the story of the FISA warrant on Hannity on March the 8th of 2017. It's taken us this long to get all of this information finally corroborated on the books. Look, there's no other way to put this, and I don't know and I don't care what the rest of the media is doing. They have basically been lying to you for an entire year. with no evidence whatsoever. We've been presenting evidence every single solitary day. Some of you say, well, why can't we get there faster? The reason is simple, because they didn't want us to find all of this. They didn't want to release all of this. They spent a year hiding this information from the Intel Committee. And now that we have this memo, which is, again, I will say only the tip of the iceberg. Now that we have the memo, now we know why they wanted to hide it. And the only way you can characterize this is an unprecedented government abuse of power, government deep state corruption, and those involved. It comes down to a very simple understanding here, that the very same people, in some cases here, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, Andy McCabe, James Comey, likely Loretta Lynch, that those same people that made sure that the many felonies we know Hillary committed, that they exonerated her. And they exonerated her long before they ever investigated her. So the fix was in. It was all rigged. And then they used Hillary Clinton. They knew it was bought and paid for. A phony, salacious Russian propaganda dossier. You know, in its best state, it was used to lie to the American people, to manipulate the American people in a general election. But in its worst state is what we now know, that same Hillary Clinton bought and paid for dossier was used as a fundamental basis to obtain a FISA warrant to spy on an opposition party and campaign and to spy on an incoming president. First, the goal was to defeat Donald Trump with this information that they all knew was phony, that they all knew was full of lies, but they did it anyway. And the misrepresentations to the court, I have no doubt, are going to be addressed at some future point. If I was the judge in this case, I would be apoplectic today. And then on top of it, then they used it to undermine a president, an incoming administration, and to create what has been a year of nothing but hell and havoc as a result of what it is they did, this abuse of power, this corruption, this shredding of the Constitution. Anyway, joining us now to debate, discuss, and talk about this, we have Dan Bongino's back with us. He's a former Secret Service agent, NYPD, contributing editor at Conservative Review. Buck Sexton is with us. He is the host of the syndicated radio talk show America Now, former CIA, former NYPD Intelligence Division Specialist, Sarah Carter. Sarah, I have the audio. You were on my show. We first began this process March 8th of 2017, and here we are now. What is your take on the memo? I think it was worse than what I even expected.
It is. It's worse than what I even expected. I mean, obviously, we had some hints of how bad this was going to be because congressional members that had viewed the memo had come out and told us, had talked about it publicly, but really pushed and fought alongside Chairman Nunes to get this memo public and get it without any redactions. And I'm so grateful for that because now that we look at it as Americans, we can see that the complaints that the DOJ and that the FBI first had, that this was going to somehow impede on our national security and reveal the processes by which we obtain these type of warrants, was a complete and utter lie, Sean. And what we also know now is that this investigation into President Trump was built upon, as we had suspected, as we had been told over and over again, on a shoddy dossier put together by somebody who apparently did not want to see President Trump as president of the United States, a foreigner, a foreign intelligence person, by the way, Christopher Steele, who was working and gathering information on behalf of Russians and being paid for by Hillary Clinton and the DNC. I think this is stunning how it was weaponized. We had used earlier on, I remember last year, talking over and over again, we talked about the weaponization of our FISA courts, about the weaponization of our intelligence community. And I think what we're seeing here was a weaponization of that. And it's so unfortunate, but so grateful that we live in a nation that we can expose this and fix it.
It took a long time. It really did. And, yeah, I think Devin Nunes, who's taken a lot of unfair abuse over this, do the American people want to know that this happened? This goes to this goes to the heart of our electoral system. This goes to the heart of our constitutional republic. This goes to the heart of unreasonable search and seizure. Dan Bongino.
Yeah, Sean, it's clear as day after reading the memo now that the FBI and the Department of Justice were hijacked by a political campaign for president. I mean, there's no way to read that. And, Sean, here's another thing. I'm already seeing some Democrats spin on this, which was interesting. A couple of days ago, they wanted this thing suppressed at all costs, and now they're trying to say, the FISA thing is no big deal. So you can't have it both ways. But what's critical here to remember is, Sean, this stuff happened or it didn't. We can have a respectful political disagreement about the effects of tax cuts. You can't have a disagreement about the existence of a FISA warrant and the application sworn to and the paper trail in it. Either the dossier was used, as Andy McCabe attested to, or it wasn't. I mean, these facts are absolutely devastating. There's no amount of spin in the world that's going to make this go away. The DOJ and the FBI were hijacked by the Clinton campaign.
Buck Sexton, what's your take on it?
Totally agree with Dan, and have to say thank you to Sarah for all the work she's been doing, despite all of the MSM naysayers out there. Sarah's been putting story after story out for people to actually get to the truth, and this is a day of reckoning. Look, the previous denunciations of this memo, we should just go back and look at everything that was said by anyone at DOJ, FBI, and honestly in the media too, although they hadn't read the memo necessarily ahead of this. That was just the most dishonest and disingenuous smear campaign. It was complete and utter crap. Reading this memo today, there's nothing in it that jeopardizes national security, and that anybody at all, Sean, would think that the American people should not know what is in this memo is laughable, except it's also deadly serious at the same time. I mean, it is a preposterous position. I cannot believe that anyone will be showing their face on TV later thinking that somehow that's a defensible position. We had to know this stuff.
The FISA court never would have approved spying on the Trump team without the FBI's bogus Trump dossier. And I tell you, one of the more deceptive things that they did here, number one, they never let the court know where this came from. Now, that in and of itself is an omission in a way to lie to a court. Number two, this phony, they knew that Steele had leaked to Michael Isikoff. All right, so Michael Isikoff basically is saying the exact same thing coming from the exact same source, and they're trying to present it and mislead the court into thinking they've got corroboration of what is the same exact thing. Now, I've got to imagine that a FISA court can bring these people in and hold them in contempt at any point. Sarah Carter.
Yes, they can. I mean, what they did was they piggybacked off the same information, withheld that from the FISA court, did not even inform the FISA court that Christopher Steele had already told Bruce Orr, who was at the DOJ, who's been demoted twice since all of this was discovered, and whose wife worked for Fusion GPS, did not even disclose to the court that Christopher Steele himself was on a mission to not get President Trump elected. I mean, this is incredible. The FISA courts would have laughed them out of the courts had they disclosed this information. Another thing, the fact that they were able to push this through the FISA court based on, an unverified dossier and actually lying to the FISA courts, because that's the way that I see it, allowed them to create a disinformation campaign to the public. Because once the information got there, once they were able to start collecting communications on members of President Trump's campaign, they were then able to start leaking. And they could leak information to the press and then create this big Russia collusion narrative that everybody was going to be buying into.
Though. Remember Glenn Simpson's testimony before House Intel. Remember, he was trying to coordinate with the Clinton campaign to leak dossier information to the media that they wanted out. So
absolutely.
So there was
right
complicity
there. In black and white.
Yeah, all right, stay right there. We'll take a break. More with Sarah Carter, more with Dan Bongino. Buck Sexton is with us. 800-941-SEAN is a toll-free telephone number. You do not want to miss a very powerful Hannity tonight, 9 Eastern on Fox. We've been right the whole time, and we knew it. I've been telling you we knew it. There were things we couldn't tell you that we knew, but it was so slow in the process, and I'm very thankful that some people fought hard to get this truth out to the American people. All right, as we continue, Sean Hannity Show, Sarah Carter, Buck Sexton is with us, Dan Bongino is with us. I guess the important thing is, and we've been saying this in the lead up to this release today, Sarah, that there's a lot more behind it that's coming.
still so much more, Sean, that is not out there yet, but will be coming in the upcoming weeks and months. I've spoken to both Congressman Meadows, Jim Jordan, as well as other members of Congress, and they say this is just the beginning. I've also spoken to, FBI officials and others who have, some of which have become whistleblowers. This is much bigger than what we're seeing in this 4-page FISA memo. I think another interesting point, you had brought up Michael Isikoff and the Yahoo News article. There was also another person by the name of Taylor Sears who worked with Michael Isikoff. Now, Taylor Sears, the House Judiciary, the Senate Judiciary, Committee is asking for all of his communications because guess where Taylor Sears went to work? He went to work for Fusion GPS.
No. All right. Let me bring up this point because I think this is very, very important. Now we have, as a result of all of this, Dan Bongino, proving the entire investigation into Trump-Russia collusion, this bogus investigation, we don't have any evidence, is in large part based on what has happened here with this dossier. That is irrefutable at this point, is it not?
Yeah, the special counsel is now officially a scam. It's a sham. It's a bad infomercial. It's nonsense. It's based on entirely unverified information that proven categorically false. Sean, going forward, just to kind of piggyback on Sarah, you guys are right, and I know you're probably privy to some information as Sarah is too. There are a lot of open questions that are yet to be answered, and two of them quickly that I think the audience should keep in the back of their head. Who verified the asset? Who verified Christopher?
It wasn't.
There's a unit in the FBI that does this. Who verified this guy and failed to mention he was working for the Hillary campaign? And another question, who swore to the warrant? I'm pretty sure we know. I'm not willing to put it out there now. I'm pretty sure you might know as well. But who swore to that warrant, raised his right hand, and said this information is authentic in front of that judge? I think when we find out that name, that's going to be deeply disturbing to a lot of people.
Four times, Sean.
Exactly,
that
four
warrant.
times it was. All right, let me get Buck in for the last word here.
Sean, the defense I'm seeing from Democrats on this is that there's other information that we don't yet know, and I knew that would be the case. I've been writing that and saying it for days now, but here's what I would add to find out then what that other information is. The stakes are too high. There is a presidency at stake.
All right, thank you all. We appreciate it. 800-941-SEAN, our toll-free telephone number. You want to be a part of the program. When we come back, an exclusive interview with President Trump's attorney, the chief counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice, Jay Sekulow, and so much more to come. And Hannity tonight, 9 Eastern on the Fox News Channel. I promise you're not going to want to miss it.
A lot of questions about this Russian dossier, and there's evidence that has come out that the DNC helped fund it. Did you know that was happening, and were you surprised to hear it if you didn't?
I asked one question on November 4th, and I was told that I did not need to know, and so no, I did not know.
Did the DNC actually know what they paid the lawyer who commissioned the dossier? Did the DNC know what was in it?
Well, again, you're going to have to ask folks who were at the DNC at that time. Well, no, I mean, I learned about the dossier a few days ago.
You don't believe Hillary Clinton knew about this either, is that right?
Oh, I don't know.
High up in the campaign, be informed of this?
Well, I mean, she may have known. When did you learn the DNC and the Clinton campaign were behind the dossier?
I wasn't aware of the arrangement at all.
And then how could you have led the DNC and be in the dark about the dossier?
I wasn't aware of the arrangement at all.
But do you see these things, Senator, as equivalent of the Hillary Clinton campaign looking for dirt from Russians and Russians offering dirt to the Trump campaign?
If you're asking about the dossier, that was funded by a conservative online publication, Washington Free Beacon.
At first, but then the Hillary campaign.
But wait, let me finish. Yep. And they hired a firm that was working with a British Secret Service agent. And then when they decided to drop it, apparently we now know that some of the funds to continue the investigation were paid for by the Clinton campaign.
Hillary, is there a difference between your team paying for this opposition research and Donald Trump's people working with the Russians to influence the election? Is there a difference?
Of course there is. And
all right, glad you're with us. News Roundup and Information Overload Hour here on the Sean Hannity Show. I look at this memo, now unclassified, as the biggest example of government corruption in our lifetimes and maybe ever, and an abuse of power. You know, when you read this memo, it shocks the conscience, as we were told it would, to think that a Hillary Clinton bought and paid for dossier compiled by Christopher Steele, a guy known for his Russia sources, who may have actually paid people for these Russian lies to influence the American people in an election year, paid for by the DNC Hillary was controlling in the campaign of Hillary, over $12 million. Steele paid himself, the money funneled through the same law firm, the DNC funneling through Perkins Coie, as well as the Clinton campaign. And at 4 separate times this was authorized. The initial time and the 3 separate times thereafter, because it has to be reauthorized every 90 days. Neither the initial application for this FISA warrant that is based on Hillary Clinton's bought and paid for salacious lies, nor any of the renewals disclosed or referenced the role of Hillary Clinton, her campaign, the DNC, and where the funding came from. They purposely withheld that from the court. And in other words, that they didn't tell the court they were funding Christopher Steele's efforts, even though the political origins of the Steele dossier were in the hands of senior DOJ and FBI officials. And if you look at the initial FISA application, and this is in the memo, it noted Steele was working for a named U.S. person. It didn't mention Fusion GPS. It didn't mention Glenn Simpson. It didn't mention that Steele, we now know, had an anti-Trump bias, well invested in Trump losing. You know, they didn't say any of this to the court when they were applying or reapplying for the application. The application didn't mention Steele was ultimately working on behalf of and paid for by the Clinton campaign and the DNC. In other words, you have a Hillary Clinton bought and paid for, now proven false, known to be false at the time, dossier, and then the FBI and high-ranking officials, Department of Justice, intelligence community, using a FISA warrant to spy on an opposition party candidate in the lead up to an election, and then an incoming president-elect. They didn't want Trump elected, and they didn't want him to remain the president of the United States. I've never seen anything like it in my life. And then to add to this, Michael Isikoff, he writes a letter based on Christopher Steele leaks, and they purposely present it as it is independent corroboration of the Steele dossier when it came from the same source. That, too, is corruption. Joining us now, he is a counselor to the President of the United States. He's also the chief counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice, Jay Sekulow. I said back in March of last year that all of this was happening. We got the first signs that the FISA warrant was issued against the Trump campaign. It's all turned out to be true and worse than I ever imagined.
So let me give you a timeline that I think is really important for people to understand. I've gone back and retraced the timeline. So here's a report. In the summer of 2016, the FBI and Department of Justice evidently sought a FISA warrant, and it was denied. They weren't able to get it. They came back then. The dossier was compiled in June of 2016. That's the earliest dated report of the actual dossier. They then sought a FISA warrant again on October 21st, 2016. It was signed by Comey and then the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, Yates. And at that point, the FISA warrants obtained. Now, you got to understand, so the FISA warrants obtained based on the evidence contained in the Steele dossier. And also this, the Yahoo report to Michael Isikoff, which we find out now, as you just said, Sean, is actually the same information just being regurgitated. But then here's the interesting fact. Then you go to January after Donald Trump is now the president-elect, and I think that's important to understand. And what happens at that point on January 6, 2017, there's a meeting with the president and James Comey where Comey thought about, and he testified to this later, that he told him about this dossier. He told him that he was not under investigation, but he thought that he owed the president an explanation for this. He didn't want a J. Edgar Hoover type situation, didn't want him to think I was briefing him on this sort of thing to hang it over him in some way. I was briefing him on it because we had been told by the media it was about to launch. We didn't want to be keeping that from him. But again, my reading of it was important for him to share it. He did say that it was salacious and unverified. Here's the falsity of that. 6 weeks before that, or 8 weeks before that, he used that dossier to get a warrant. I mean, I want everybody to understand that.
So James Comey lied.
The President of the United States, that this is a salacious, unverified. We want you to know what's out there. We're not investigating you. You're not under investigation based on this. We just want you to know what's out there. I don't want to be J. Edgar Hoover. It's just out there. But it's not. We're not investigating you. 7 or 8 weeks before, you could take exactly to October 26th, 21st. They got a FISA warrant based on that dossier that they told the president is unverified and salacious. But you know who they didn't tell it was unverified and salacious? The FISA court judge.
That means it was obtained under false pretenses. That, to me, would be a crime. Now, we spoke earlier with Greg Jarrett.
Saying he's right.
He's identified 18 U.S.C. 242 in terms of abuse of power. What crimes would you be looking at if you were examining this on the other side?
Well, the first thing is the inconsistent lying to. Well, I understand what Greg's saying. He's right, but a false statement to a federal court judge, the basis of a FISA's look. There's a lot of libertarians do not like FISA. I happen to be in favor of the FISA process. I don't like it abused, and this clearly was. But it hurts our argument that we need FISA when this nonsense is going on. So you look at the false statements that were made to the Department by the Department of Justice and the FBI. And by the way, it was renewed multiple times. I mean, we need to understand that. Second warrant renewal, April 19th, 2017. The first warrant renewal, January 19th, 2017, a day before the president sworn into office. Then it's renewed again, July 18th of last year. Andrew McCabe and Rosenstein. Then you have...
but Rod Rosenstein is the guy that appoints the special counsel. I mean, is there any conflict there?
Look, I'm not going to opine on whether there's conflict or not. I will tell you what there is. Here's the problem. The problem for the Department of Justice is, and again, this is not against the line agents, and I'm not talking about a deep state, because this is not deep. This is right at the top. Here's the problem. The entire basis upon which all of this opened up was a false report. That they sought and obtained a FISA warrant for a Russia investigation and a counterintelligence investigation. And they acknowledged in this, and it's in the Nunez report, that, number one, McCabe says that without it, they wouldn't have even sought the warrant. Not that they would not have gotten the warrant, obtained the warrant, but they would have not sought the warrant. That's number one. Number two, that in the process of doing that, there was a leak by Christopher Steele, and they terminated his relationship formally, but yet Bruce Orr, the number four at the Department of Justice, whose wife's over at Fusion GPS working on what? The Russia Steele dossier. You know, look, I understand the left is trying to change terms, but here's what I want to say to my friends that are left of center, libertarian, and look, and I've got a lot of sympathies on the libertarian side of this, and I'm always concerned about government oversight overstepping its bounds. My goodness, it was the ACLJ that brought the IRS cases. But here's what I want to say. How can you have trust in a system that allowed this to happen? And I don't care if you're a Republican, Democrat, whoever you are. How can you trust a system that allowed this to happen? And that's why I said you need a special counsel, all right, to investigate this.
Let me go through this a little more carefully, and because there's an awful lot of rigging going on here, and some of which isn't discussed in the memo. At any point, you could tell me that I'm wrong. If you believe Donna Brazile, she made the most painful call in her life when she had to call Bernie Sanders and say that the primary election with Hillary was rigged. Okay, nobody seems to care about that issue. If I was a Bernie supporter, I'd be pretty pissed off. Then we have James Comey and Andrew McCabe and Peter Strzok and Lisa Page and maybe even Loretta Lynch, all involved in exonerating Hillary Clinton before they ever investigated her, months, as a matter of fact, before they're writing an exoneration letter, before they ever even interview her or the principals in the case. And that has to do with her mishandling of classified, top secret, special access program information, destroying such, deleting 33,000 emails, acid wash of the hard drives, and then, of course, breaking up devices. So there were crimes committed, but the fix was in my opinion. You don't need to weigh in on that. Then you have... Imagine if Donald Trump paid for a salacious dossier on Hillary Clinton full of lies and propaganda, and that same dossier, that would have been designed to manipulate the American people in an election year. That's bad enough in my mind. We know politicians lie all the time, but using a phony dossier to lie takes it up another notch or two. But then also that becomes the basis of a warrant to spy on Hillary Clinton in the midst of a political campaign, and if she won, then spy on her incoming administration. Imagine if all of that happened in reverse, Jay Sekulow. What would the reaction in the media in the country be and the Democratic Party be?
The exact opposite of what that media reaction right now is. Here's what they're doing on the other networks. They're trying to not really talk about the substance of what has transpired here, but rather the Democrats haven't gotten out their side of the story. But here's what I say. Let's just look at what is the dossier was utilized for a FISA warrant. Everybody, right, left, and center. That is not the way you run an investigation in a constitutional republic. That's just not the way it works. And I think the real danger in all of this is that we've unleashed, if you will, a tidal wave of civil liberties violations by this, a tidal wave of a misuse and abuse of a process. And in that process, my goodness, they made a false statement to a federal court judge.
What are the penalties for that?
Jail.
We'll take a break. Jay Sekulow is with us, the American Center for Law and Justice. He's the chief counsel, also counselor to the president. We'll get more of his thoughts on what should happen from this point. We'll have more on the memo throughout the program today. 800-941-SEAN is our toll-free telephone number as we continue. All right, as we're joined by Jay Sekulow, he is the chief counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice and a counselor to the president. I think we have to ask ourselves if we believe in our constitutional republic, if we believe in equal justice under the law, if a court is lied to and certain key facts are withheld from a judge in the obtaining of a FISA warrant against an opposition candidate. The judge never heard in this case that it was bought and paid for, this information, by Hillary Clinton and the DNC. I'm sure that would have had an impact on the judge's thinking. It was first, as you pointed out, denied in early July of 2016. My question is, how do you now undo this mess, and how do we get to the bottom of all of this? And for those people that did commit crimes, did purposely mislead a court, those that are involved in wanting to spy on opposition party candidates in an election year and willing to lie to get there, what should happen to all these people?
Well, number one, I really think that this is where you have to have a special counsel. There's never a justification for a special counsel. This would be it, because this goes to the heart of the FBI and the Department of Justice, including its leadership.
Who should appoint that? Jeff Sessions?
Yes, and they have rules and regulations upon how that is done. He's not said he would do that. He said he's evaluating it. But this takes it up a notch, and I think you now have a situation where, look, I think that the Inspector General, from everything we're gathering, has done an incredible job. When they couldn't find those 5 months worth of missing text messages, and they were blaming Samsung, that Inspector General, he got them in 24 or 48 hours. Mm-hmm. So I think that report's going to be coming out in the next 2 to 4 weeks, and I think...
Well, the Inspector General, this has all been referred to the Inspector General earlier today. I'm not sure if you got that news yet.
Yeah, no, I did, and that's fine. But I just think that it may need more than that, and I actually do think it needs more than that, and that's where a special counsel to evaluate this, because this was statements given to it. I don't want people to lose the fact that these were statements not just made in the air, not just a policy statement. This was before a foreign intelligence surveillance court.
We'll have more with Jay Sekulow on Hannity tonight. I think the biggest corruption, abuse of power story in our lifetime. Jay, thank you for being with us. We appreciate your insight. 800-941-SEAN is our toll-free telephone number.
I was urging my former colleagues and frankly speaking, the people on the Hill, it was more actually aimed at telling the Hill people, get as much information as you can, get as much intelligence as you can before President Obama leaves the administration.
This is not anything political has been alleged. The allegation is that somehow Obama administration officials utilized intelligence for political purposes. That's absolutely false.
Say if the FBI, for instance, had a FISA court order of some sort for a surveillance, would that be information you would know or not know?
Yes.
You would be told this.
I would know that.
If there was a FISA court order on something like this.
Something like this, absolutely.
And at this point, you can't confirm or deny whether that exists?
I can deny it.
There is no FISA court order?
Not to my knowledge.
Of anything at Trump Tower?
No.
You say there was a wiretap, that there was a wiretap of Russian agents, and that those Russian agents were communicating with Trump staff. That's why they were picked up. That's what the intelligence community. That's what the intelligence community has told us. That's what's been reported very widely. Those are the facts.
There is still no evidence that the president was wiretapped by his predecessor.
Mr. Clapper and Ms. Yates, did either of you ever request the unmasking of Mr. Trump, his associates, or any member of Congress?
Yes. In one case, I did.
At no time did I ever submit a request for personal or political purposes or to voyeuristically look at raw intelligence, nor am I aware of any instance of such abuse by anyone else.
I was speaking to him and briefing him about some salacious and unverified material.
All right, there you have, all the Democrats. Notice they're contradicting statements on FISA, the dossier, the unmasking, and now they're just trying to say, well, there's information that they don't have anything. Then release it. That could be their answer. And I know people that have read their 10-page counter memo to this, and it doesn't have anything to counter this. And it is now the biggest literally the biggest scandal you'll likely, hopefully, ever see in your lifetime, because there are so many different factors in play here. You know, understand fundamentally what this is about. This is about people in the upper echelons of the most powerful places in our government, in the FBI, in the Department of Justice, in the intelligence community, and with the intelligence community, those also powerful tools that we have granted them, and the vast majority of people that work there use it in the right way to keep we, the people, safe. It's necessary in a world that has darkness and evil and people that want to destroy us. It's just a fact. But what you have in this case is you have, and it all goes back to, fundamentally, foundationally, when they gave Hillary Clinton a pass when she committed numerous felonies as it relates to the email server investigation. We know the people, the characters involved. You don't write an exoneration before you do the investigation. Matter of fact, James Comey is on tape saying that very thing. And then you have, the same characters, the same players, the same people involved. And when you look at what they did in this particular case, Hillary buys what turns out to be Russian lies, Russian propaganda, Russian misinformation. The FBI knows this dossier is full of lies. Now, this is the scary part. It didn't stop them from using Hillary's bought and paid for Russian lies to obtain a FISA warrant. And they purposely